Have you ever stumbled across something from the past that feels like it should not exist? An object, a carving, or a structure that seems to whisper, "Your timeline is wrong." Tonight, let us step into that strange corner of history. The corner where discoveries do not fit neatly into textbooks, where archaeologists whisper instead of celebrate, and where the past seems far more complicated than anyone expected. Welcome to a journey through the world's most puzzling ancient finds, the kind that spark debates, challenge long-held assumptions, and force us to wonder whether entire chapters of human history have quietly slipped through the cracks. Because every so often, someone digs up something that simply should not be there. Throughout the world, scattered across jungles, deserts, mountains, and forgotten ruins, lie artifacts that refuse to explain themselves. They do not match the tools, the cultures, or the technologies we associate with their eras. Instead, they sit like loose threads, tugging at the edges of our understanding. These discoveries are real, documented, photographed, measured, yet they remain frustratingly out of place. Some are so advanced that scholars debate whether their creators possessed knowledge far beyond what we assume. Others appear suddenly in the archaeological record with no clear origin, almost as if they arrived without a history at all. What makes these findings even more fascinating is not just their construction, but the silence surrounding them. Some were locked away in museum vaults. Others vanished during wars, renovations, or political upheaval. Still others are protected by local traditions, spiritual bans, or government restrictions that prevent deeper study. And each time a door closes, the mystery grows. So tonight, we begin with a simple question. What do we do with discoveries that do not fit anywhere? Do we force them into the timeline we already have? Do we ignore them because they cause too many problems? Or do we let them open the door to something bigger, a version of human history that is wider, stranger, and far older than we ever imagined? Whatever the answer, one thing is clear: these mysteries are not going away. They are waiting. Long before the great cities of the Maya or the towering temples of the Aztec world, an even older civilization rose quietly along the Gulf Coast of Mexico. They left behind no written explanation, no surviving chronicles, and almost no clues about who they truly were. What they did leave, however, are some of the most astonishing monuments ever carved by human hands: the colossal stone heads of the Olmec. These massive sculptures, some weighing as much as 40 tons, are among the most mysterious creations in ancient American history. Each one is carved from a single block of volcanic basalt, transported from quarries more than 50 miles away. And here's the part that stops researchers in their tracks: the Olmec had no wheels, no metal tools, and no draft animals to help with the job. Yet they shaped these stones with incredible precision, leaving behind smooth surfaces, balanced proportions, and lifelike facial features that still hold their expression thousands of years later. Even the logistics remain unsolved. How were these enormous stones moved through dense tropical forests? How were they lifted into place and carved so finely using only stone hammers and sand? And why do the faces look so distinct, almost as if they are portraits of real individuals, each with unique expressions, helmets, and details? As more of the heads were uncovered in the 19th and 20th centuries, their mystery deepened. Some were found half buried, others placed in ceremonial plazas, watching silently over landscapes that have long since changed. The Olmec left no written records to explain their purpose, leaving only questions. Were these rulers, warriors, guardians, or something even more symbolic, a message meant to endure long after their civilization disappeared? Whatever the answer, the colossal heads stand as a reminder: The deeper we look into the past, the less simple it becomes. In the world of ancient discoveries, few artifacts have caused as much debate as a single, yellowed sheet of parchment known as the Vinland map. At first glance, it looks simple, just another medieval world map with rough outlines of Europe, Asia, and unknown seas. But one detail set it apart and shook the foundations of established history. A faint coastline drawn far to the west, labeled Vinland, a region that appears to match Newfoundland in North America. According to traditional timelines, Europeans did not reach the Americas until Columbus crossed the Atlantic in 1492. Yet the Vinland map, if authentic, was drawn around 1440, decades earlier. Its contours of Greenland and northeastern Canada are far too accurate to be guesswork, suggesting that someone, somehow, had already mapped part of the New World. But this discovery quickly turned into controversy. Scientists studying the map found contradictions that pulled it in opposite directions. Radiocarbon dating confirmed that the parchment itself is genuinely medieval, made in the early 1400s. But analysis of the ink revealed traces of modern pigments not used until the 20th century. The paradox was impossible to ignore. How could an ancient parchment hold modern ink? For decades, scholars argued fiercely. Some believed the map was a brilliant forgery crafted to fool collectors. Others suspected it was a genuine medieval document that had been retouched or repaired at some point, blurring the line between real and altered. And with access to the original being tightly controlled by institutions, clear answers have always remained just out of reach. Today, the map sits at the crossroads of certainty and doubt, part history, part puzzle. Whether real, forged, or something in between, it forces us to reconsider a challenging question. How much of history is discovery? And how much is rediscovery? Deep in the rugged landscapes of the Kimberley region in northern Australia lies a tradition so old, so carefully preserved, and so protected that only a handful of people outside the local indigenous communities have ever witnessed it firsthand. These are the Wandjina, ancient, halo-headed figures painted on cave walls thousands of years ago. Their presence feels calm, powerful, and strangely otherworldly. The Wandjina are unlike any other ancient artwork on Earth. Each figure is painted front-facing, with large oval eyes, glowing white bodies, and radiant halos stretching around their heads. They have no mouths, and their expressions feel serene, almost watchful. Some paintings span entire cave ceilings, standing out sharply against the red sandstone as if they were created yesterday rather than millennia ago. Archaeologists date some Wandjina sites to around 3800 BC, but Aboriginal oral tradition teaches that the Wandjina come from the dreaming, a sacred era when the world was shaped. According to the custodians of this tradition, these figures represent powerful sky beings who brought rainfall, life, and laws to the land before returning to the clouds, leaving their images behind so people would not forget them. What makes the Wandjina even more intriguing is their remarkable preservation. In an environment where intense heat and monsoon rains should destroy pigment, the paintings remain vivid. Scientists have found no binders or adhesives in the paint, yet it bonds perfectly to the stone. Even more mysterious, the art style has remained unchanged for thousands of years. Elders repaint the figures following strict ceremonial laws, ensuring that every detail stays exactly the same. Access to many Wandjina sites is forbidden to outsiders. Photography is restricted. Research requests are often denied. For the custodians, these images are not artifacts, they are living spiritual beings. And perhaps that is why their mystery endures. The Wandjina are not just ancient symbols. They are part of a story still alive today. long before the rise of Sumer, Babylon, or the great kingdoms of Mesopotamia. An earlier culture flourished along the riverbanks of what is now southern Iraq. This was the Ubaid civilization, a society that built some of the earliest temples, developed organized farming, and laid the groundwork for the world's first cities. But among their everyday pottery and tools, archaeologists found something truly unusual: a collection of small figurines unlike anything else from the ancient world. These figurines, discovered in the early 1900s at sites such as Tel al-Ubaid, Eridu, and Lagash, depict slender humanoid bodies with long necks, elongated heads, and large almond-shaped eyes. Some appear to have scaled patterns carved into their clay surfaces. A few even show female figures holding infants, yet both mother and child share the same reptile-like features. Their craftsmanship is deliberate, careful, and strangely uniform. What makes these artifacts so puzzling is the absence of any corresponding mythology. Later Mesopotamian cultures left extensive written records describing their gods, heroes, and rituals, but none mention reptilian beings or anything resembling the Ubaid statues. This makes the figurines even harder to place. They seem to belong to a belief system that left no written trace behind. Adding to the mystery, many original figurines disappeared during periods of conflict, especially after the 2003 looting of the Iraq National Museum. Access to surviving pieces is limited, and detailed study has become nearly impossible. Only a few old photographs and scattered museum notes remain to guide researchers. So we are left with questions. Were these symbols of fertility? Ritual guardians? Masks worn by early priests? Or do they reflect something seen, remembered, or imagined by a culture that existed thousands of years before written history? Whatever their purpose, the Ubaid figurines remain one of the strangest and least understood artifacts of the ancient world, silent, unclassified, and waiting for answers that may never come. Across the cool northern plains and forested valleys of ancient Japan lived a culture unlike any other, the Jomon people, who thrived for more than 10,000 years. They left no palaces, no kingdoms, and no written records. But they did leave behind some of the most intriguing artifacts in world archaeology, the clay figures known as dogu. At first glance, dogu figurines look like small human shapes, but a closer look reveals something far more unusual. Many have enormous goggle-like eyes, rounded helmets, segmented limbs, and patterns that resemble the seams of suits or armor. Some even appear to have chest plates, belts, or jointed limbs carved into their designs. For artifacts created thousands of years before metalworking or advanced tools, their appearance feels startlingly modern. Archaeologists have found more than 18,000 dogu across Japan, carefully crafted from clay and fired at temperatures that required impressive control of heat. Some were discovered near hearths or in ritual spaces. Others were intentionally broken, perhaps as part of a symbolic ceremony meant to transfer illness or misfortune away from the owner. The traditional interpretation is that dogu represented fertility, healing, or spiritual protection. But not all figurines fit that explanation. Some are androgynous, some are masculine, and many show patterns too symmetrical and precise to be purely decorative. Modern 3D scans even reveal mathematical consistency surprising for artifacts made by hand in prehistoric times. Adding to the mystery, many dogu are now classified as national treasures. Access to them is tightly restricted, high-resolution images are limited, and foreign researchers must go through lengthy approval processes to study them. The originals are locked in vaults, shown only on rare occasions. So the question remains: were the dogu simple ritual objects? Or were the Jomen trying to depict something they experienced, imagined, or believed with extraordinary devotion? To this day, the Dogu stand quietly behind glass, small, ancient, and endlessly mysterious. In the dry highlands of southern Peru, where the desert stretches into endless red-brown plains, lies one of humanity's greatest ancient puzzles, the Nazca Lines. These enormous geoglyphs, carved into the desert floor between 500 BC and 500 AD, form geometric shapes, spirals, animals, and long, ruler straight lines that extend for miles. From the ground, they seem like simple paths. But from above, they reveal massive artworks that span the desert like a hidden tapestry. Some of the figures are so large that they can only be fully understood from the sky. And among them is one of the most intriguing images of all, a humanoid figure carved onto the side of a rocky hill, now known as the astronaut. With a round head, large eyes, and a raised hand, it looks out over the valley unlike any other Nazca design. What sets this figure apart is its placement. While most Nazca images lie flat on the desert floor, the astronaut is positioned on a steep slope, visible from far away and strikingly clear when viewed from the air. Why the Nazca chose this location, or what the figure represents, remains an open question. Researchers have proposed many theories. Some believe the lines were part of ceremonial pathways used in rituals honoring water, fertility, or the sky. Others argue that the patterns align with celestial events, forming a massive astronomical calendar. And then there are the more speculative interpretations that the lines were symbols meant to be seen from above, perhaps by divine beings or for spiritual communication. What makes the Nazca Lines even more mysterious is their preservation. Because the region receives almost no rain or wind, the designs have remained intact for more than 1,500 years. Today, the site is heavily protected, restricting flights, drones, and access points to preserve the fragile lines. And so, the desert keeps its silence. The figures remain visible, but their meaning, especially the watchful astronaut, stays just beyond our reach. Deep in the dense jungles of southeastern Ecuador, where steep cliffs meet twisting rivers and sunlight barely reaches the forest floor, lies one of the most talked about underground landscapes on Earth, the Taos Caves. This massive system of natural tunnels stretches for miles beneath the surface, dark, silent, and unusually smooth-walled. For generations, local Shuar communities have spoken of hidden chambers, strange lights, and sacred passages not meant for everyone. But the real mystery began in the late 1960s, when an explorer named Juan Moric reported something extraordinary. He claimed he had seen a metal library deep within the caves, a series of metallic plates engraved with symbols and geometric patterns no one could identify. He described rooms with perfectly cut stone walls, metallic sculptures, and artifacts unlike anything from known South American cultures. His claims were bold, controversial, and impossible to verify. Yet they caught the attention of researchers, adventurers, and even governments. In 1976, an international expedition supported by Ecuador and the United Kingdom set out to investigate the caves. Among the participants was Neil Armstrong, the first human to walk on the moon. With helicopters, soldiers, engineers, and scientists, it was one of the most ambitious cave explorations ever attempted. The official report concluded that no metal library was found, only natural formations and small cultural remains. But many who were involved suggested that access to certain chambers had been restricted, blocked, or declared unsafe. Over time, requests for new expeditions were increasingly denied. Today, the Taos Caves remain tightly controlled. Foreign researchers rarely receive permits, and some areas are off-limits due to cultural protection laws. Photos are scarce, maps are incomplete, and large sections of the caves have never been properly surveyed. Whether the metal library was a misunderstanding, an exaggeration, or something real hidden far below, one truth remains. The deeper we go underground, the more history seems to slip out of reach. Across India's vast spiritual landscape, where temples rise like stone mountains and ancient texts stretch back thousands of years, there is a recurring idea that continues to fascinate researchers: the Vimana. These mysterious flying vehicles appear in Sanskrit literature, temple carvings, and traditional stories, always described with surprising detail, structure, and function. In ancient epics such as the Mahabharata, Ramayana, and several later texts, Vimanas are portrayed as airborne chariots that could move in any direction, ascend vertically, or travel across long distances. Some descriptions even mention multiple levels, windows, rotating mechanisms, and controlled movement features that sound remarkably technical for writings that predate many classical civilizations. What deepens the mystery is the consistency. Across regions and centuries, the descriptions maintain a similar structure: circular or dome-like bases, tall central towers, and intricate carvings that resemble layered machinery. Many temples in South India, especially in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, have towering structures whose designs echo these ancient depictions, almost like stone versions of the legendary crafts. However, access to certain temples is extremely restricted. Some inner sanctums and upper structures cannot be photographed or studied by outsiders. Detailed architectural measurements, drawings, and inscriptions remain stored in archives or protected by temple authorities. The result is a fragmented puzzle pieces that exist, but cannot be fully assembled. Scholars suggest that the Vimana stories may symbolize divine travel, cosmic journeys, or advanced imagination within poetic tradition. But others point to the unusual precision of the descriptions, wondering if they preserved memories of earlier ideas, technologies, or symbolic blueprints now forgotten. Because in the end, the Vimanas sit at the intersection of mythology and mystery. They are part spiritual symbol, part architectural inspiration, and part historical question mark, reminding us that ancient cultures often held knowledge we still struggle to understand. Scattered all around the world in deserts, mountains, museum basements, private collections, and even old excavation notebooks are a series of artifacts that do not belong to any clear chapter of human history. They are small, often overlooked, sometimes poorly documented, yet each one whispers the same unsettling message: something about our timeline is incomplete. Among these objects is the famous carving on the lid of Pacal's tomb in Mexico. To some, it simply shows a king descending into the underworld. To others, the posture and surrounding symbols look like a figure seated in a complex mechanism, surrounded by patterns that resemble controls, flames, or propulsion. The debate has continued for decades, with no final answer. Then there are the Dropa stones, circular discs discovered in remote caves along the China-Tibet border in the 20th century. Early reports describe them as thin granite plates with carved spirals and tiny symbols that some researchers struggled to classify. Many of these stones later vanished, leaving only old photographs and conflicting testimonies, a mystery made even more challenging by restricted access to the region. In the southeastern United States, small clay idols known as the Mooney people figurines depict short, wide-eyed beings described in Cherokee oral tradition. Their origin is unknown, and they do not match the typical artistic style of the period. A handful survive, stored in local museums with minimal records. And then there is the Nampa figurine, a small fired clay figure reportedly found deep beneath Idaho soil in the late 1800s, in layers far older than any known human settlement in the region. If the report is accurate, it challenges everything we understand about North American timelines. But like so many artifacts from that era, the circumstances of its discovery remain impossible to fully confirm. Taken together, these objects do not rewrite history on their own. But they do something more subtle and perhaps more important. They remind us that the past is full of unanswered questions, missing evidence, and discoveries that refuse to fit neatly into the story we have built. The world is older, stranger, and far less complete than it appears. In the end, all these discoveries, the colossal stones, the strange figurines, the forgotten maps, the sacred paintings, the unexplained symbols share one quiet truth: the past is not a closed book. It is a landscape still shifting beneath our feet. Every time we think we have drawn a clear timeline, something unexpected surfaces and reminds us that human history is deeper, wider, and far more mysterious than we were taught. Maybe these artifacts were spiritual symbols. Maybe they were artistic expressions. Or maybe they hint at traditions, memories, and knowledge we no longer understand. What matters most is not choosing an answer, but keeping the door open. Because curiosity is what keeps history alive. And as long as we continue asking questions, these forgotten pieces of the past still have a voice. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey tonight. If you enjoy exploring strange corners of history, hidden stories, and unanswered mysteries, feel free to follow along. We have only just begun to scratch the surface. See you in the next story. Good night, and stay curious.